Welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2023, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Google and Intopia, and our Gold supporters, Barrier Break and Tetralogical. You can follow us on Mastodon, and if you have questions for the presenters, post them using the ID24 hashtag, or post them in the YouTube chat for our Q&A at the end of the session. A reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website. I am absolutely famished, is that the right word, to be joined by Bruce Lawson. I'm going to toss it to you, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be invited back to co-host ID24. I get a great deal from it every year, so it's lovely to be able to give back. Particular shout out to my boss, Derek, at Bernardo's, the children's charity, who now employ me, for letting me have the time off work to be here. And I'm really excited for the next talk because our next two speakers are household names in the world of accessibility, but I've never actually met them in real life. So this is the next best thing. So a beautiful accessibility partnership, advocates and lawyers working for change. Folks, give a big Zoom, YouTube, a virtual round of applause for Lainey Feingold and Kim Charlson. Lainey and Kim, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Lainey Feingold speaking. Really glad to be at ID24. Love this community, love all the volunteers who put it together every year. So thank you. Like Bruce said, our title here today is A Beautiful Accessibility Partnership, Advocates and Lawyers Working for Change. And we have the word advocates, we have the word lawyers, and our contrast color on the slides, which is a nice celery green against the blue. Also on the title side, we have my name and Kim's name. I'm Lainey Feingold. Like I said, my website's on here. It's lflegal.com. I'm a disability rights lawyer out of the United States. I've been working in digital accessibility since the mid-1990s, and it is my honor, thrill, and fun to be doing this session with Kim Charlson. Kim, take away the introduction.
Thank you, Lainey. I have to say it's an honor for me to be here with Lainey today, but I'm Kim Charlson. I'm based out of Watertown, Massachusetts, and I am the executive director of the Perkins Braille and Talking Book Library and the past president of the American Council of the Blind. And one of my passions in life is system change and accessibility. So I've been an advocate for a long time, and you're going to learn more about my journey in all of this space. But so much of it wouldn't have been possible without the support of Lainey, and it's a thrill to be part of ID24 today.
We have Kim's email up here also, which is kimcharlson@acb.org, because we want to be in touch with you after this, and we want to keep this community growing. I do want to give a slight addition to Kim's. I didn't ask Kim if it's okay to say this, but Kim wasn't just the ACB president. She was the first woman president of ACB. She also was the first woman Talking Book Library director, and the first blind woman to do both those things. Isn't that right, Kim?
Yes, thank you, Lainey. And I forgot to mention, and it's so appropriate for this group, that I'm also the president of the North American Caribbean region of the World Blind Union and a member of the World Blind Union Executive Board. So that brings me into the international space, where I also get to have opportunities to do advocacy.
And Kim does a million other things as well. So, and I do a few other things too. So we can save those because we're going to be talking about our journeys. Okay, so as I said, the words advocates and lawyers are in our highlight color. So we wanted to start with just, what do we mean by advocates and lawyers? So the very first question I want to ask to Kim is, what makes an effective accessibility advocate?
So I think what makes a good advocate are people who can think beyond just their own particular disability or their own particular space. So, one of the things I try to teach others about advocacy is yes, maybe you will benefit personally from whatever you're going to advocate for, but try to think about the bigger picture. So I think making sure you have an advocate on your team that is good at thinking about the bigger picture and is creative, thinking about solutions and how to come up with those solutions. But I think that's the most important thing, is really thinking beyond just my need, my whatever, and being more global in what you're thinking about as you come to solutions for advocacy situations.
And while we were planning this session, we're talking about how to be a good advocate, and we're all convincing people as advocates, as lawyers, whatever your role, whatever brought you to ID24, you're someone who is convincing people about the importance and the need for accessibility, for disability inclusion, for including disabled people in the digital world. And Kim said, like, a great thing that I tried to capture in the images here: what makes an effective ally? The first thing is, don't make an enemy out of the people you want something from. So I've got a great Darth Vader picture with a big X on it, because we're always advocating, meaning we're always trying to advance accessibility. And if we make enemies out of the people we need collaboration from, they will not be our accessibility partners. Instead, we want partners. And that's why I have a smiling picture of a Black woman in business environment shaking hands. So I love that. Don't be an enemy. Be a partner.
Exactly. And don't, I often tell people, you may be really unhappy, but let's not start the conversation that way. Let's not use a sledgehammer to say hello.
Yeah, exactly. Which leads us to our next word. Okay, so we're going to be talking about advocates and lawyers. So lawyers can open doors. Lawyers have a lot of power, but how do you open those doors? The first image I have is a woman with a sledgehammer, and we didn't even plan that, Kim. we didn't plan that segue. She has a sledgehammer and she's about to break down the door of a boardroom. And it is true that lawyers can do that. And sometimes aggression is the only path that the law can help you with. But I put a big X over that, because in my experience since the mid-1990s, the better way to open doors to advocacy is like this image here, a smiling woman who is pushing open a door. So in my practice, I practice something called structured negotiation, which is collaboration, which is a way of trying to bring advocates and lawyers to the table, as we'll talk about throughout, to create a partnership and to not be enemies. So the idea we had for this session, first of all, I've never presented with Kim, even though we've worked together for many years, as you will see. And I feel like so much of what we've done, because we've been able to use the law and Kim's incredible advocacy skills, has application to everyone. So whatever your role, our goal is that you get something out of this session in order to help you be a better advocate for accessibility. So why this session? We have 4 things. First one, disabled advocates are essential to accessibility initiatives.
Absolutely. And I think that it's no, everybody that's listening to this presentation is going to be aware of the "nothing without us" mantra of the disability rights movement. And it's just so true that, some institutions, corporations can think, oh, we have this great idea, we're going to move ahead with this, it's going to help people who are blind or have disabilities. And then they get, 3/4 of the way through the whole project, and they finally talk to someone who has a disability, and then there's a big speed bump because it doesn't work. So don't start a major initiative without input from the community you're trying to serve.
So yeah, so we wanted to share, you'll see we're going to share some of our collaborations. I wrote a book about structured negotiation and people associate me with it, but the truth is everything I know, I've learned from disabled advocates like Kim and others who we'll talk a little bit about. And they've been essential to everything I've been able to do as a lawyer in this space. So We know law can open doors, so we want to share some ways to do that. Unfortunately, especially in the United States, but increasingly globally, we have a great legal framework that gives people with disabilities rights, that recognizes that accessibility is a civil right, but too often law is seen as something that's negative, that's a checklist that only lawyers can use. So we wanted to do this session to kind of show some of the stuff we've done that changes the formula on that. We've also learned a lot of stuff working together all these years, and we've seen light bulbs go off. We're going to talk more about that.
Yeah.
And we'd like to share. So I got a picture of a light bulb going off, and that's why we wanted to do that session. So the first thing we want to talk about is our collaborations together. And the first collaboration we want to talk about is the first one we did, which is working on Talking ATMs, which is, I have a picture here of an ATM jack. Kim, you can explain that a little bit. And the title I put on this is Accessibility is Privacy, because that's what I learned working with blind advocates like Kim on the Talking ATM initiative in the mid-90s. So Kim, you want to say more about that?
Absolutely. So my first opportunity to work with Lainey was around Talking ATMs. So my story back when Talking ATMs came out, they had no accessibility for people who are blind or have low vision. And I learned how to use them by pushing the buttons in a certain pattern. And I would always get $40 out of the ATM. That was my habit, my pattern. So I went to the ATM one day and punched in my pattern, and out came $5 worth of stamps. And I thought, oh, I must have hit the wrong button. So I did it again, and I got $5 more worth of stamps. And I said, this is not right. Something's wrong. I had to turn to the person in the line behind me and say, can you help me? What does the screen say? And it turned out to be a software upgrade over the weekend. And it was the press 1 for English, 2 for Spanish that was on the screen. And I didn't know that. And that's why I kept getting $5 worth of stamps. And it was that moment that I said, this is crazy. This ATM should be accessible to me. I shouldn't have to turn to somebody in line and ask them for help. It's privacy. That was my financial account, my bank account. And that person could, see what I was doing because I had to get help. So I turned to Lainey and I said, what can we do? This can be fixed. Technology is out there. It's got to be available to us. We need to make these ATMs accessible. Let's go. And that started our collaboration.
And there's a lot to say about Talking ATMs in the initiative. It's a big part of my book. At the end, we did Talking ATM collaborations using the law as a background, but without lawsuits. Instead, with collaboration with blind people, blind organizations like ACB, the California Council of the Blind, American Foundation of the Blind, and others all across the country before there were only a few big banks that were all across the country. And it was really, we titled this A Beautiful Partnership, Advocates and Lawyers. It was really ended up to be a beautiful partnership with the banks. And I wanted to share this quote here that says, working on this project had a definite impact on the way I think and feel about what I do. And that's a quote from one of the bankers. And I don't want too much text on the slide, but I just have to read you this whole text, which miraculously, I have an email dated 2001, which I saved and have a pink square around it from this lawyer that had met Kim in the initiative, in the collaboration. He said, like I say in the first line, I have to admit that working on this project had a definite impact on the way I think and feel about what I do. When I saw Kim Charlson literally jump up and down with joy at getting $20 out of an ATM, my view on what we at Fleet Bank, which was the East Coast bank that eventually was purchased by Bank of America, it affected my view on what we at Fleet should be doing. It completely changed. I know it's an experience I will carry forward no matter what I do. And who knows, maybe I'll wind up in a place to impress this upon another bank. And that kind of captures in my view, the best qualities of collaboration. This is the power of collaboration to change hearts and minds of people who have the power to offer accessibility. Kim, you want to say anything about that jumping up and down thing?
It obviously made a bigger impression on him than I remember, for sure. But it was exciting because I knew what that accessibility was going to mean to thousands and thousands of other blind people around the country, being able to take control of their own finance and get money whenever they needed money from their own account independently. And that is huge. It's absolutely huge for independence.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a few more campaigns that we worked on, and then we're going to talk about the common threads that we feel can be used by anyone. You don't need a lawyer to get this whole thing started. You can use the strategies that we used in the Talking ATM initiatives, regardless of what your role is in trying to make accessibility more prevalent across the world. The reason I like this quote is because the relationship that we were able to build with these bankers, because we weren't fighting, but instead we were collaborating, was extremely significant. And this is not the only guy who we have an email like this and who we know had lasting impact, because he got to know Kim and other blind advocates around the country in this initiative. So another one we wanted to share with you is this one. Accessibility is privacy. Yes, accessibility is also health and safety. And it's really important to frame our accessibility initiatives, not just some random accessibility idea, but like Kim said, a real thing that deals with a person's privacy, a person's health and safety. So up on the screen here, Kim, I have the picture of the script talk. I want to take it from there.
Great. So healthcare and access in this particular case is access to prescription label information. How do you make that information accessible on a pill bottle for someone who's blind, has low vision, or has a print disability? So, I was having people tell me that, what can we do? I mean, there's certainly ways in using low tech to label things. You can put a Velcro dot on the lid of a bottle, or you can scratch an A for antibiotic on the lid. But what happens? Use a rubber band around the bottle. But what happens? When you have 3 or 4 medications, and then you have to start doing which one is which. And I began to hear stories from people who had actual life-threatening situations occur because they inadvertently mixed up the pill bottles. So one, thank goodness it wasn't a tragedy, but it was still very, very upsetting, was a young mother with twins, and her father was older and lived in the home with her, and she was doing caregiving to him. And his pills were in a certain place, and they were kept on the shelf in that order. And then her children had some medication. So granddad came along, took his pills, put them back in the spot where the children's pills went inadvertently. And she administered pills for her father to her children. And they did get sick, but it wasn't fatal. She was absolutely heartbroken, distressed. She's I'm their mother. I should be able to take care of them. I can do this. Why can't I identify their medications? And why can't we do something? So that situation really got me thinking about, why can't we have access to prescription labels? And thank goodness there's, an organization called Envision America that has a script talk system for using RFID chips to tag a pill bottle with the information about the prescription specifically. And that worked really great. You had the pill bottles, you got your medication from Script Talk from your pharmacy, like Walmart or CVS Caremark. And that worked because you also had the reader that could scan the RFID chip and read you the prescription information and allow you to review it. But it didn't help us to solve the problem of, I went to the doctor today and they gave me an antibiotic for an infection. So now I've gone home with a pill bottle with instructions written on it that I can't read about the antibiotics that I'm going to take. You know, what did the pharmacist tell me? Take 2 pills 3 times a day or take 3 pills 2 times a day? Now I can't remember what they said. So, so we worked with CVS for several years on coming up with what we call an in-store solution to accessibility to prescription label information. And it's an amazing app that CVS has right on their CVS app that everybody uses in the pharmacy section, called Spoken RX. And it uses RFID technology to scan the label and uses voiceover from a smartphone to read back the details of a prescription label. So Lainey's going to play a sample of what that sounds like. The volume's a little low on the sample, so turn your headphones up so you can hear the example of Spoken RX.
Scan. Hold your device near your prescriptions package. To cancel tag reader, tap on cancel button or shake the device.
So it gave me some good verbal instruction. Now I'm going to take the medication bottle and the RFID sticker to the top of my phone.
Spoken RX. Heading. Prescription information. Heading. Patient name. Jane Doe. Prescription. Amoxicillin 500 mg capsule. Directions. Take 1 capsule by mouth 3 times a day for 10 days. Important information.
Yeah.
Important.
Okay, Kim. Yeah.
Great, great. So that's an example of Spoken RX. It's app-based, and anyone can download the CVS app, and you go through the CVS pharmacist that you use to set up the Spoken RX and to get your prescription file coded so that when you refill your prescriptions, the sticker is placed on automatically, and it's in every CVS location in the United States.
Yeah, and you know, we started with Walmart and these initiatives. And again, this was a way, there were no lawsuits, there were no, you know, there was no negative press about the companies. We went to the companies, and because of Kim and the people that she brought together to form the teams in each of these, with each of these companies, Walmart shoppers, people who used Walmart to get their prescriptions, were able to form a relationship with the Walmart pharmacist, and the same kind of light bulbs went off that the banker had. Because the truth is, people don't go into pharmacy to, you know, create risk situations for people. So because we weren't just talking about the law as a checklist, the law as a requirement, but we were talking about accessibility as health and safety, we were able to get first Walmart, then CVS and other pharmacies across the country to understand the importance of this issue. And it absolutely would not have happened without advocacy and advocates like Kim, or Kim herself. Let me just leave it at that. Kim was, you know, we had other blind people all over the country, but Kim was a driver of the initiative. And, you know, we're able to say the law requires it, even though there's never been a lawsuit about it. But, you know, in the United States, we have this incredible law called the Americans with Disabilities Act that disabled people fought for and can be used in creative ways that I think we did with the prescription label cases. And by emphasizing the health and safety and not just some random legal requirement on a piece of paper, I think that was everything.
And the case studies made such an impact on all of these corporations that they, you know, they don't want to hear about cases like that. That's the last thing they want to hear about. They want to hear about success.
Yeah, and they don't want to hear people put rubber bands on there. I mean, I remember myself learning about this issue from Kim, like people have to put rubber bands on, you know, 1 rubber band on 1 bottle, 2 rubber bands on another one, keep 1 in the kitchen, keep 1 in the bathroom, just so you can keep track. The cognitive load to just try to remember what the things are and where they are was just very impactful. So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about how you can pull out these ideas and use them in your own advocacy efforts. So I'm going to go to our next
Hold your device near the
joint,
prescriptions package.
our joint effort. Accessibility is independence. It's similar to the ATMs, but we work with the credit reporting companies to make sure that credit reports were accessible to people who are blind. Kim, you want to say a quick thing about the credit
Yes,
report effort?
yes. So the three credit reporting agencies, everyone in the United States has access to a free credit report from either or all of the three credit agencies, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. But there was no platform in place to allow for someone who's blind to get an accessible credit report in a format that worked for them, Braille, large print, or audio. And in 2008, we advocated for that to be put into place, and we were successful, and we continued to have that available. And then 2022, we realized that, things were changing in the formats, and they used to send the audio out on a CD, and now lots of people don't have access to CDs anymore. And we also were getting requests for accessible PDF versions of your credit report that you could go back and study instead of just printing it out and then having it not be accessible to you. So we went back to the table with the three credit agencies in 2022, and we negotiated a new agreement. The Braille large print was the same. The audio has kind of evolved because people are using digital audio and computer, and we were able to incorporate into that settlement the use of accessible PDF as a way to save your credit report so that you could use a screen reader and access your report and study it and get more involved in managing your credit and just taking a look at your credit and what that means to everybody. Everybody should be doing that.
Yeah, as well as, doing the online and having the WCAG compliance for the online credit reports. Again, never would have happened without the relationships that the agencies are able to form with blind people who could tell their story. Stories are everything in advocacy about why this mattered, which isn't rocket science. No one wants to have to share their credit report with somebody else to get the information. So we didn't want to leave you with thinking this is only a thing Kim and Lainey can do together. So we want to spend one quick minute on Kim's favorite partnership without Lainey, which is this image here, which says HBO Max. HBO Max is rolling out audio description for select titles. And just like accessibility is privacy and health and safety and independence, it's also education and entertainment. So Kim, you want to say a quick word about that?
Thanks. So I've worked on several entertainment and education cases with disability rights advocates out of California, and around the issue of audio description and audio description for streaming services. So, it's a mandate in the United States to have audio description for a certain level of television content, but streaming services were really not mandated in the current law. But we went to our first case was Netflix. We went to them and said, based on a recent settlement you had with the deaf community about captioning for Netflix programming, we'd like to talk to you about audio description for Netflix programming. And they were collaborative. They were really great. And Netflix content, the majority of it has audio description as a feature you can turn on. I also had the opportunity to work with Hulu on the same issue. And most recently, as Lainey shared, HBO Max, which is now known as Max, and is contributing a huge amount of content through our settlement agreement. They've been great partners. They're developing a sustainability plan to move forward when the settlement ends. And we've just had a really positive experience bringing audio description accessibility to television and streaming services. So that's been super great.
And then we had a quick session on my favorite partnership without Kim. Now, my favorite partnerships are always with Kim, but to just say really quick, accessibility is baseball. And we did a wonderful negotiation with Major League Baseball, who has remained a wonderful partner of ours, again, with collaboration, mostly because of this person in the picture, who is Brian Charlson, Kim's husband. Brian is more than just Mr. Kim Charlson. Brian is an advocate and accessibility expert in his own right. And most important for that collaboration, he is a baseball fan. And so the baseball fandom formed a relationship between the blind fans and the Major League Baseball people, which ended up with a wonderful web accessibility agreement. When I say wonderful, if you're listening, you're saying it's not so wonderful, I see problems. But when there are problems, which there are, and I won't lie and tell you I never hear from a blind baseball fan ever since we did this, I do. But we have the relationship. I know I can personally tell you that Major League Baseball wants to fix anything that comes up. Of course, things shouldn't come up, but they do. We know they do. And the beauty of this kind of advocacy where you're building relationships is when they do come up, you have something to build off of and get things fixed right away. So we want to talk about now the kinds of, themes, issues, ideas out of our collaborations that can be strategies for all of you. And so that's why it's called Collaboration Strategies for Everyone. You'll see, and you have seen, there's a dolphin image on some of the back of my slides. We're going to talk about the dolphin in a minute. The big sort of first message is don't wait for the knock on the door. Don't wait for the sledgehammer that we saw earlier. Don't wait for the lawsuit. Don't even wait for a nice knock on the door from Lainey and Kim saying you have an ADA violation. We want to work in collaboration. Got to be proactive. So we have I put here 60 combined years of advocacy. We probably have more than that. We probably have about 52 or 3 together. But I put 60, I don't know, it's a round number. We certainly, independently, we have more years than that. Okay, so we have a few themes for the takeaway.
So I guess the number one theme that I always say is make sure you engage with the disabled community and people in the community. Make sure they're at the table in the conversations and helping to find your solutions.
Kim, so obviously hiring people with disabilities at every phase of product service development, from first design idea all the way through testing, is critical. If you're in an organization, you don't have disabled people in those roles yet, I want to say yet, how can people work with organizations, NGOs, nonprofits? How do you find the people if you don't have them in your organization already?
Exactly. Great case in point. If you're looking for somebody, and you even want to hire an accessibility specialist, but you don't know where to start, talking to an advocate like myself can give you clues, can point you in the right direction to find those people in your community, and get them into your corporation wherever they're needed. So.
Or your school, or your nonprofit, or whatever organization. I have a resource page on my website. It's really not that hard to find people if you know that it's important and you put it on the number 1 on the list, which is where we have it. Respect advocates' expertise. It's kind of the same thing as engage with disabled people, but one of the beauties of structured negotiation has been the ability to use the law in a way that disabled people get to be experts. Because too often in a traditional lawsuit, the person who's bringing the claim has to just be that person, the plaintiff. And then there has to be a different expert. Whereas in the best collaborations, you have people like Kim, who's an expert in talking prescription labels, or an expert like Brian, who's an expert in web accessibility. So respect advocates' expertise. That's
Absolutely.
That's our number 2.
Yeah. And often it can end up saving money to listen to what your advocates are saying. Test it. Don't just necessarily listen to that one person you're talking to, because sometimes that can take you down a path that isn't the right path. But vet those ideas, but sometimes they come up with ideas, we, the disabled community, that solves a problem with a lot less muss and fuss than you might have been thinking about as you were trying to solve a system-wide problem in your organization.
Yes, because people with disabilities are creative thinkers, and they have to be, because we have an inaccessible world. The way I got into web accessibility was when we were working on the Talking ATMs. Towards the end of that, in 97, 98, a couple of blind advocates out in California, Jerry Coons and Roger Peterson in particular, they were like, okay, great, we have these ATMs, we can independently get our money, but there is this new thing called online banking. And if we don't make that accessible, we're back to square one. And those guys had all these jerry-rigged contraptions about communicating with the bank with a phone and translating information into Braille that they got back from the bank. So they knew when only like 0.4% of people were using online banking. These blind advocates knew that if we didn't work on accessibility of banking websites, we were going to have a problem. And out of that came the first web accessibility agreement in 2000 that is entirely because of the blind advocates involved in that initiative. Because I can assure you, I wasn't using online banking back when only 0.4%. Okay, some of our other tips, I'm going to run through them a little quickly because we want to make sure we have time for questions. Learn how to listen. Too often we get stuck in our own ideas about what we think the other person's saying. We're not even listening to the other person. I want to give a shout out to Kim, who is a wonderful listener.
Well, thank you, Lainey. And it's a skill that I have to work on sometimes too. So it's not just that I'm saying, hey, you people have to listen. Advocates have to listen too. We've got to hear what is being said by, the bank, the pharmacy, the corporation, the school, about what their issues are, what their problems are, so that we can solve those kind of problems collectively. So listening is a key skill. I also think it ties into the next bullet, which is practice humble curiosity, which I think is a really nice one. It's okay not to have the answer in your head and to just ask hey, I don't think I'm understanding this exactly right. Maybe you could dive a little deeper and help me really get my head around why this is a problem. It's okay to say that. And I'm sure advocates and lawyers will help you understand that so that you can come to the table with a better sense of why an issue might be more urgent.
Yeah, I love that humble curiosity too. I heard that first from Jenny Leigh Fleury, Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. So I think it's true. It's hard as a lawyer to always do that. Both parts of it, the humility part and the curiosity part. Know who you're talking to. This is such an important thing that we have done in our advocacy collaborations. There's a picture here of a cat looking in a mirror and seeing a lion. Because every organization, every person, every team, every leader sees themselves a certain way, and our job as advocates to know what that way is. So when we're dealing with pharmacists, we know they care about not poisoning their customers, so we talk in the language of health and safety. When we're talking to bankers, they don't want people that have to give away their PIN, which to a stranger, which, like Kim said, was the root of all the ATM work. So we talk about that. Yes, it's always civil rights and phrasing things in a way that recognizes who we're talking to.
I think that ties right into the number 6 on our list of top 10s is be trustworthy and have trust. And I think that's so crucial is a corporation or an agency organization is kind of putting themselves out on the line, especially with advocates, to get formally engaged with a structured negotiation or any kind of serious negotiation. There often has to be trust and non-disclosure agreements sometimes as well. But advocates have to be as clear as the attorneys and all the participants that this is a trust relationship we're building, and we have obligations to maintain that trust. And that's what brings the success after we've come to a solution, that we can go back to the credit agencies and we can go back to the pharmacies and say, something's not working right. We need to work this and figure out what's going on. And that is all about trust.
Okay, so we have about 4 minutes to do whatever else we want to share with you. So we have a few minutes for questions. So going a little bit quickly, the next one, explore fear. People are afraid of things, and we have to know what they are. Whatever your role, whoever you're trying to convince, whoever you're advocating for, they might be afraid of how much it's going to cost or what their boss is going to think. People are afraid of disabled people. People have fears around that. So we have to recognize that and explore it. Kim, I'll just run through the next ones and then you can add all together.
Perfect.
Value and celebrate small steps. Huge to value small, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when we did the ATMs, we got the first, the first 5, we wanted 500,000, 5,000, 10,000. We had a press release, first
That's
store.
right. So sometimes you make that celebration, you do a press release, you tell your story again. But, we had a press conference when I jumped up and down at the ATM, it was like the first time, and there were cameras and TV stations there because it was a big deal for our community.
Practice equanimity. Again, Kim's my teacher on this. Equanimity is basically someone saying no, 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 no. You're just calm in the storm. Staying true to our goal of digital inclusion for disabled people. We get mad, they get mad. It's very hard for people to get angry when you're being calm. So yeah. I'm always working on that. And have and understand empathy. We could have 10 more minutes on empathy. We won't. I'll just share with you the point of view gun from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. All you had to do was point it at someone and they would get your point of view and you would understand theirs. We don't have that, so we have to practice empathy. And while we're doing all those things, our attitude matters. So we want to close with just a little bit of attitudinal ideas. The first is, you don't need to be a shark. We have the Jaws theme song playing against the picture of the shark with the big teeth jumping out of the water and a big red X on it. Kim, I don't think I've ever seen you be a shark in all the years we've worked together.
So, exactly. So, yeah.
It's not effective. Put it this way, you wouldn't do it. You don't want to do it with your family and your community and your neighbors. So why do we do it in our advocacy?
That's right. You can have big ideas, but you don't have to be a shark.
You don't have to act like a shark. I got the cute little goldfish here with the shark fin on it. You don't have to act like a shark. Instead, be a dolphin.
Be a dolphin.
They've got the cute little sounds. And in this image, they are taking fish out of a plastic tube and happily eating fish because these dolphins collaborated to get the fish out of the tube. It's a National Geographic experiment. I invite you to check it out. And all these skills we're talking about, I think of as dolphin skills. It helps me remember not to be the shark when we're trying to be advocates. So that's what we wanted to share with you. We have our cute dolphin picture at the end. Again, I have Kim's email up here, kimcharlson@perkins.org, and my website, which is lflegal.com. Everything on there is Creative Commons, so help yourself. And my email, lf@lflegal.com. That's what we got. Adrian.
Lainey, Kim, that was wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate you describing what the dolphins were doing. I was briefly alarmed. Bruce, do we have any questions?
We do. Thank you very much, Kim and Lainey. That was really interesting and entertaining. I was looking at the ATM and thinking, whatever were they thinking releasing that with no accessibility? But then, of course, we work in this world, but people do exactly this still now in 2023. Pretty much every day. A question from the YouTube channel from Thomas, I believe. once you achieve a structured negotiation and the company agrees to make accessibility changes, do you follow up with them once the agreement term completes to see if they are still complying?
Kim, you want to say something?
I could answer that, and most of the time, absolutely. We have a schedule of report outs from the company, and we get together and go over those things and monitor the process. And it's usually a 2 or 3 year period. And I mentioned that with Max, the settlement that is coming to a close at the end of October, they have voluntarily created a sustainability plan for their accessibility. And I think that is a phenomenal idea to, keep thinking about your accessibility and plan for your accessibility moving forward so that it doesn't just drop off your radar when the settlement is over.
Yeah, let me just add to that like all settlement agreements, one's reached in collaboration, one's reached in lawsuits, they have a legal deadline. But that doesn't mean we don't stop making sure that the access continues. And I can say that once I do an agreement with someone, I have so many examples. We're always on it because we are not yet at a stage with accessibility. It is not one and done. It is not one and done. It takes constant vigilance, and it takes, have an accessibility page, have a feedback loop where you can hear from customers, students, employees, whatever, what goes wrong when things fall off, because they will. And I'm telling you, I'm running on to 2 decades with some of these companies because we had the relationship. That's the key thing. It's not going to be perfect and stay perfect unless it's never going to be perfect and stay perfect. If you want to keep it going, you got to have the relationship to build off of.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is one from me, actually. Kim, I absolutely hear what you're saying about nothing about us without us. But talking of relationships, how can people who are disabled, people who are attempting to advocate, and how can companies attempting to engage ensure they don't accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, trip over the line into exploitative behavior, effectively treating disabled people who are volunteering their advocacy, treating them as unpaid consultants?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think it's a little bit challenging, but I think that the disability community has come a long way. For such a long time, we were just listen to us and we'll help you figure out a solution. But I think we've evolved to a place where our expertise now is valuable. It's valuable to corporations, to educational institutions, companies. And I think that those entities, because of the law and because of past agreements and that kind of thing, I think companies are absolutely recognizing that accessibility is something that fits into their diversity initiatives. So my definition of DEI is DEIA, as probably all of you have the same definition: diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. They have to all go hand in hand. And now that people are talking about diversity, it's the perfect time to really stress accessibility as part of diversity. And that's what I do all the time.
So would it be fair to maybe summarize that as saying to an organization, absolutely seek feedback from real people who have these problems, absolutely seek feedback from those people about the potential solutions, but don't expect them to do the unpaid work of implementing those solutions?
Exactly. Absolutely. And to seek not just, I talked to a blind person or I talked to a person in a wheelchair, and this is what they said. Mm-hmm. One person does not a solution make. You have to be sure that the one person you talk to is the right person, that they really are coming up with a solution that's going to work for that community and not just that one person who's advocating for themselves and not thinking with a more global perspective.
Gotcha. Thank you. And as I'm talking to 2 people who work in legal advocacy. Can I just say no further questions, my ladies?
Well, I think that's perfect. And this has been, I've never presented with Lainey before, but it was great. And ID 24, this is my first experience and it's great. So keep up the great work, and Lainey and I will keep doing what we do.
Thank you. We were delighted to have both of you, and to some extent, Bruce. And for our viewers, if you like this session, mash that YouTube like button. Don't forget you can subscribe to youtube.com/inclusivedesign24 to be kept in the loop on our future events. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters, Google, Intopia, Barrier Break, Tetralogical, Intuit, InfoAxia, and the Law Office of Lainey Feingold. Right there. Inclusive Design 24 will be back on the hour with our next session. We'll see you then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.